Hey there, this is Ivan. How you doing? Well, I am running games of 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons and other role-playing games maybe, if we ever get around to it. There's a whole bunch of other role-playing games on my shelf here for the Lebanon Library. Let me ask you this. Have you ever read a book, maybe it's a series, or you've watched a movie, series of movies, a series on television, and you finally get to the end of it. You know you're getting to the end of it. You start to get disappointed. You started to get a little sad because you like this story. You like these characters, and finally it comes to an end, and there's no more story. And you wonder to yourself, I wonder what happens next. I really wish this would go on. I really like these characters. I really like what's happening in that fictional world, whatever it might be. Or how about this? You're watching that movie, reading that book, watching that TV series, binging on Netflix, whatever it happens to be, and you think to yourself, man, I wish I could be one of those characters there. That might be kind of interesting. Or even more interesting than that is you think to yourself, boy, if I was one of those characters, if I was a person there, I would make different decisions than those characters made. I would have done something different. And you start to wonder to yourself, I wonder what would have happened if this guy did this instead of that. And that right there, those things are kind of the heart and soul of role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons. Now, role-playing games these days are probably more or less confusingly called tabletop role-playing games to differentiate them from the role-playing games that, or computer role-playing games. These are games that literally you sit down with a bunch of friends and you grab pens and pencils and character sheets and pieces of paper and you get a bunch of dice. You don't need all these dice. I've just been playing these games for a long, long time and I like the dice. I have a lot of dice. And you sit around with your friends and you play these games, roll the dice, and anyhow, I'm getting ahead of myself. Very different from computer role-playing games. And one of the things about Dungeons and Dragons and other games like it are that pretty much anything can happen. There are no walls. You're not constrained by whatever the programmer of a computer game made. You can go off in any kind of direction that you like. So what actually happens? What are we actually going to be doing here? Well, most of the players are going to play the part of a character. And yes, there are pre-generated characters you can take. However, it's more interesting when you make your own character up. You come up with a name. You decide what kind of person are they going to be. If we're playing 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, which we're going to start playing to begin with, if you get involved, maybe you want to be a dwarf or an elf. Maybe you want to be a human. Maybe you want to be a wizard. Maybe you want to be a warrior. Maybe you want to be some kind of really sneaky sort of person, some kind of adventurer. The sky's kind of the limit. There's a whole bunch of different sorts of people that you can play. So you determine, who am I going to be and what do they actually like? And most of what happens in the game is all the players are playing the parts of one character, making decisions for them, and another person, in this case it's going to be me, plays the part of the game master, or in D&D it's called the dungeon master. And my job becomes to play the rest of the world, to come up with a scenario. What's happening right now? Is there some kind of ancient evil that's awaking that maybe like a brave group of adventurers might need to try to forestall or perhaps stop? Whatever kind of scenario I come up with. Somebody comes up with that scenario, but then controls the rest of the world. What do all the other people in the world say and do? And that's the job of the game master, whereas the players, their job is to control one character and make decisions as that character. And what do they do? And very often what happens is, in a typical game situation, you'll say, let's say your character's name is Fred. Okay, well, I walk over here. Fred does this. I walk over there. I ask this guy, what's going on in this temple? I try to bluff my way past these guards, all these sorts of things. And very often I say, okay, you do that. And we move on. And maybe this is what the guard says, or etc. However, there are other times where we're not sure what's going to happen. And that's where all these dice come in handy. And you don't need these dice. When you start out, there's actually a whole bunch of free online dice rollers that you can get ones for your device or your computer or whatever. And you can also, if you decide you really like the game, you can go on Amazon and things like Walmart, and there's some really, there's some decently priced sets of dice, because there's all different funny dice. But most of what happens in Dungeons and Dragons is we use this funny looking die right here. This is a D20. It's a 20-sided die. And you decide, I want to do this. And like, okay, well, roll a D20. Give me a check. And you're trying to roll as high as possible. And there's a target number for that particular thing that you're trying to do. It might be 10 or 15 or 20. And, it might be 5, might be 13, whatever it happens to be. You're trying to roll at least that number or higher. Okay, I rolled an 11 here. Now, you don't just roll that die. Very often you're going to add a number to it or subtract a number from that result. Where do you get those numbers from? Well, everybody has a character sheet, and this one is blank. But there are things called your ability scores on it. Things like how strong you are, how dexterous you are, what your constitution is like, how tough you are, your intelligence, how wise you are, your charisma, how charming you might be. These sorts of things, the natural attributes of your character. And well, there's ways to figure out, are they strong, intelligent, are they a little dumb, all that sorts of stuff. Then there's a whole bunch of skills listed on the sheet as well, and there's ways to figure that out during the time we create your character. How athletic are they? How good are they at handling animals? How good are they at investigation or intimidating other people? Or how good are they at noticing things, persuading other people? How good are they at stealth, surviving out in the woods? All those sorts of things. All these abilities, your character is going to have a little number next to them, and so you add or subtract that from the roll of this side. So you can kind of look at your character sheet and find out, well, how good is this person at these things? Now, there's other abilities these characters may have if they're a wizard or something else, and that's, we get to that when we create characters. But for the most part, that's what ends up happening, is you say what you want to do, the scenario gets presented to you, you say what you want to do, then the world reacts to you. And every once in a while, you have to roll dice because the outcome of what you want to do is uncertain. And that's pretty much how the game goes. And it can be very, very exciting because we end up doing a whole bunch of things, and the world reacts to you, you react to the world, and nobody knows what's going to happen. I don't know just as much as you don't know. Now, if somebody gets really interested in this, they can go ahead and buy a player's handbook, but that's not something you need to do right away. Like I said, you can just show up. I can give you the character sheets, online, and you can figure stuff out after that. If you want to know more about the game once we get started, the starter sets are really cheap right now on Amazon. I think it's somewhere around $10. And there's another one called the Essentials Kit, which is, in my estimation, a little bit better. I think they're more like $13. Once again, you don't need to buy these things. These are just things that are out there. And this has a whole bunch of dice in it, too, as well as a bunch of the rules and what have you. But in the beginning, you don't need to know anything. You just need to show up with some enthusiasm and some creativity, and we'll sit down, we'll have some fun.